paradox of letting go. Have you ever noticed how things begin to fall into place the moment you stop trying to control them? It sounds contradictory, even wrong. After all, we're taught from the very beginning to chase dreams, to fight, to push harder. But what if the truth is the reverse? What if it's not effort that liberates us but surrender? Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." The more tightly we try to grip life, the more it slips through our fingers. And maybe that's not a punishment. Maybe that's grace. We loosen our grip, life begins to breathe. Opportunities appear without chase. Peace returns without a fight. Not because we gave up, but because we gave space. We hold on so tightly to people, to outcomes, to ideas of how things should be. We believe that attachment will bring us safety, but more often it brings tension, fear, and inner chaos. We confuse control with care, but control is rarely about love. It's about fear, and fear blocks the very connection we long for. In a world obsessed with striving, letting go feels like a betrayal of ambition. But true surrender isn't about passivity. It's about awareness. It's about recognizing when effort becomes resistance. Jung understood that the ego clings to projections, ideas, people, symbols of worth. And as long as we live through them, we can't meet the world or ourselves with clarity. We don't just attach to others, we attach to what we place in them: salvation, self-worth, the role we never played for ourselves. We don't fall for people. We fall for our own reflection in them. We chase success because we fear insignificance. We chase love because we've abandoned the parts of us that need it most. And in this desperate pursuit, we forget no one can permanently fulfill a role they never asked to play. Letting go is not rejection. It's integration. It's the realization that we no longer need to bind ourselves to what was never meant to stay. It's not the end of love. It's the beginning of real love. Letting go means seeing people as they are, not as what we need them to be. And when the projection fades, the real relationship can begin. Imperfect, but possible. But what happens when letting go feels like death? When our ego screams for certainty? This is where courage begins, where presence replaces performance, where we meet life not as a battle, but as a mystery. Jung believed the psyche has its own intelligence, that beneath the noise of strategy and striving, there's a deeper rhythm guiding us, not chaos, not randomness, something alive. Letting go is not losing direction. It's allowing life to surprise us. It's the radical act of trust that there's a deeper self within us that already knows, not the social mask, not the role we've been playing, but something older, truer, whole. This is the self Jung spoke of, the center of the psyche, beyond ego, the part of us that doesn't need applause or proof or permission. We reach it not through victory, but through surrender. We don't conquer life, we allow it, and when we do, the false falls away. The real remains. So maybe letting go isn't the end. Maybe it's the beginning of presence, of peace, of finally coming home. Letting go is not passive. It's an internal revolution. It's when the ego, tired of performing, collapses in exhaustion. And in that collapse, something real begins to stir. Our true self, buried under layers of roles and masks, starts to breathe. Letting go means we stop demanding certainty and begin to live in alignment. It's no longer about control. It's about coherence. It's no longer about having all the answers. It's about asking deeper questions. Control tells us we are safe when we know, But letting go shows us we are safe when we are present. Presence doesn't require perfection, it requires honesty. And honesty is the foundation of peace. When we let go, we stop chasing substitutes for love. We stop trying to fill holes with roles, silence with noise, emptiness with performance. The paradox is letting go makes space, and space invites what's real. Real relationships, real direction, real being, not a constant state of bliss, but a deeper intimacy with life itself. Letting go means we stop clinging to the belief that we must earn our worth. Our worth is not up for negotiation. It simply is. We are not our failures, not our projections, not the voices in our heads. We are something quieter, deeper, older than all of it. And when we release the illusion of control, we return to that place, that knowing. Letting go is not a retreat. It's a reclamation of energy, of attention, of truth. It's remembering who we were before the world told us who to be. And it's acting, not from fear, but from freedom. When we act from freedom, we are no longer tied to outcome. We are in tune with process. Jung knew this. Transformation does not come from striving. It comes from surrendering to the unconscious, to the unknown, to the unfolding. We're not here to perform life. We're here to experience it. And that experience begins the moment we let go. The ego resists this. It fears that without effort, everything will collapse. But surrender is not giving up. It is a form of psychological intelligence. It is the recognition that there is a limit, and that pushing past it by force only leads to emptiness. Jung understood that an ignored psyche creates symptoms, but a listened to psyche creates a path. The exhaustion of the persona is an invitation to breathe outside the role, to ask oneself what truly still has meaning, and to admit that sometimes, before letting go, we simply need to rest. To set down the weight of performance and allow something authentic to begin to emerge in the quiet pause. And when the persona falls, what remains is a pain few talk about. Grief for who we never were. Much is said about letting go as liberation, but little about the pain it brings. Because letting go is also a kind of death. Not physical, but symbolic, and at times just as intense. Letting go of ideas, relationships, projections, imagined futures, it is grieving for what never came to be, and that grief is real. Jung did not see suffering as a mistake to be eliminated, but as a necessary part of transformation. There is no rebirth without death. When something must leave, a plan that failed, a love that didn't survive, an identity that no longer works, it causes a rupture. And every rupture, even a necessary one, hurts. Letting go in this sense is not a cold, rational decision. It is a deep, emotional process that often leads us into silence, doubt, and vulnerability. A void appears when what we depended on ceases to exist. And though that void is fertile, it is terrifying. It's then that ambivalent feelings arise: relief and sadness, freedom and loneliness, courage and fear. All of this is part of the soul's mourning, not only for the loss itself, but for the image we maintained of how it was supposed to be, of the inner script that is now being rewritten. The ego suffers because of this. It craves answers, meaning, understanding why it didn't work out. But the self follows a different logic, a circular one, less linear. Sometimes what doesn't happen is exactly what leads us inward, to reconsider our values, to rebuild the foundation, to abandon a plan that no longer belonged to us, even if it still felt familiar. Honoring this grief is just as important as letting it go. Because only by moving through pain without denying its presence, can we truly transform. It's not about attaching to suffering, but about not skipping it. Suffering, when consciously felt, has its own time. And in that time, something ripens. Letting go is also learning to live with invisible losses, the ones that leave no tangible scars but wound the soul deeply. And in that quiet scar, new life slowly begins to stir, not as a promise, but as a possibility. When what once bound us finally dissolves, something remarkable happens. The world doesn't end. On the contrary, it reorganizes. The silence that once terrified becomes fertile. The emptiness that brought fear reveals itself as space. And it is in this space that things begin to sprout. Things that could never be born while everything was occupied by control, expectations, and noise. It's like opening a window after years of being closed. Dust dances in the light. The air shifts. At first it feels strange, a kind of peaceful discomfort. But slowly, breath returns. And with it, presence. The mind stops chasing and finally begins to listen to the body, to time, to the subtle signs of life. Imagine someone who spent years in a relationship where true exchange had long vanished, but stayed out of fear, attachment, habit. When that person finally lets go, not just of the other, but of the illusion that it must continue, there is a sudden impact, silence, emptiness. But soon after, space emerges, and in that space, they return to writing, cook without pressure, feel like going out alone, listening to music in the dark, doing something that needs no audience. This is the return of creativity, not as a task, but as expression. Jung spoke of psychic energy that returns when we stop feeding the ego. All that we once invested in maintaining the persona, controlling the future, or resisting the present becomes available again. And that energy needs somewhere to go. It is then that creativity is born, not only artistic, but existential. Creation is not only painting a picture or writing a poem, it's rearranging life with presence. It's rearranging your home, changing your rhythm, transforming experienced suffering into practical wisdom. Creation begins where we stop reacting and begin to choose consciously. And that only happens when space appears. In this space, intuition begins to speak louder. Once muffled by fear, it now resonates clearly. You start to see connections where before there were only problems. A solution appears in the shower. An answer arrives without effort after days of trying. You stop thinking in order to find and begin feeling in order to see. Time changes too. The day no longer feels like a battlefield. You slow down, not out of laziness, but alignment. Decisions become lighter because you're no longer trying to prove anything. And interestingly, things that once felt unreachable begin to approach you, not through magic, but because you finally stopped getting in their way. Think of the artist who is blocked. Someone demanding so much brilliance of themselves that they can no longer create. Until one day, exhausted, they let go. They set the project aside, give themselves rest, go for a walk, take an unplanned trip. And there, in the midst of nothing, a new idea emerges, spontaneous, alive, pressure-free. That is the power of letting go. What is real either returns, or finally has space to be born. This state of free creation, of connection with the self, is the opposite of ego logic. The ego wants control, guarantees outcomes. The self seeks expression, truth, and harmony. When the ego steps aside, the self begins to lead lightly. It does not force, it guides. It points toward direction but doesn't demand. It reveals itself through what brings you joy, even if no one sees it, even if it brings no results. It's here that letting go shows its most beautiful face. It is not just a loss, it's a passage, a bridge between what was and what can still be, between who you were trying to prove something and who you are when simply being is enough. Letting go gives you back to yourself, without excess, without noise, without burdens that are no longer yours. The space that opens after release is not an emptiness to fear. It's fertile ground, waiting for your true presence. In it, life does not shout, it whispers, and you, more attentive, cleansed from within, begin to listen. In the end, it all comes down to one quiet gesture, the opening of a hand, the releasing of illusions, fears, and repeated stories. Not from exhaustion, though sometimes that's how it starts, but from clarity, because there comes a time when holding on costs more than letting go. Attachment, though familiar, is not love. It is born of fear, of lack, of trying to keep alive something that may have already served its purpose. To love is to allow another to exist, to allow life to flow, even if it doesn't meet our expectations. Control, on the other hand, is not a sign of strength. It is a refined form of resistance, the ego trying to force reality to obey its desires. But life under that logic is lived in constant tension, in conflict with the present. And no soul can endure that for long. Jung said, healing does not come when we force change, but when we accept what is. When we stop fighting life and start listening to it, when we give up chasing what should be and courageously face what is. Acceptance is not resignation. It is openness, a doorway through which true transformation enters. So maybe now the most important question is, what are you still holding on to? What image? What story? What person or expectation still occupies space in you and blocks the arrival of the new? What if, by letting go, it could finally breathe? Letting go is a risk, but so is holding on. And often, remaining in captivity is more dangerous than the fear of change. Because we are not here to perform. We are here to live. And life, truly lived, requires courage. Courage to shed the layers that no longer fit. Courage to move toward what matters. Courage to simply be. Life begins where the illusion of control ends, and it is at that point, quiet, intimate, that we return to ourselves, not as an ideal, but as presence. And from there, everything that truly matters finds its way. If this message resonated with you, turn on notifications so you don't miss more reflections on letting go, awareness, self-understanding, and deep psychology through Jung in everyday life. And if you've made it to the end, leave a comment. I release what no longer belongs to me. That way, I'll know you've walked this path with me and that this video touched something in you. See you in the next video.